Thanks all for joining us. My name is Abby. I am a cultural resource manager professionally, and I'm currently in a PhD program at the Michigan Tech's program in industrial heritage and archaeology.
I am John McIntosh. I'm a second year mechanical engineer at Tech.
I'm Ethan Gerke, a first year electrical engineer.
So just to give you a little background, what we are talking about is a larger context of border walls or the architecture and the built environment that defines city boundaries, as well as the way how people within those communities interact and work throughout their lives. Specific to a lot of what we're talking about, if you look at this map, we do have this, you can see Fox Creek is a channelized creek. Following it, just on the geographic east side, we do have Alton Road. We're going to be looking at a lot of the politics and social pressures that led to physically reinforcing city actions to physically reinforce these. I do want to just give you guys a heads up that this is a conversation that's part of the broader city of Detroit going on with the broader city of Grosse Pointe. But Jefferson Chalmers, that neighborhood, this is their geographic east boundary, that it does affect the way how people live and work there, even though throughout history we can see, despite these physical barriers in the built environment and the landscape architecture here, we do see that there is a contingency in the diversity of the neighborhoods on both sides of these borders. There's a contingency in the way how workers, shoppers, school kids, and all the residents who visit family members who live all over the rest of the neighborhood, there is this broader contingency. Even though we are talking about barriers, let's just all keep in mind too that there is this broader context to, even though they're built, the people who live and work in Jefferson Chalmers still exist despite a lot of these, and despite the politics of how they've been included in conversations about constructing these physical barriers between their community and the city of Grosse Pointe, that is. And, keep in mind too that in Detroit, like many American cities, social class and ethnic differences are always evident in the built environment, especially in the social organization of communities that we can see. And not only the architecture of constructed buildings, especially in a residential community, you will see a difference in what the housing looks like on either side of these borders. Consistencies in these built environments exist, as well as with changes that happen as a result of the construction of new borders. In the context of housing segregation on the basis of race and class, not only divided Jefferson Chalmers and the broader state of Detroit from Grosse Pointe, but also provided the precedent, the quality of housing and the access to amenities between both communities. And we're not just talking about people moving from Jefferson Chalmers around the broader area, but also the way how Grosse Pointe utilizes the same infrastructure, especially for transportation, stormwater, wastewater, sewage, etc. When we look back historically, what's really important is when we get to just around the beginning and going through the course of World War I and World War II. And what I want to draw your attention to politically is what's called redlining, or the official government documents and policy that defines the qualities and economic values of a neighborhood that exacerbated, but actually started to define trends in the way how the built environment was different on either side, as well as the construction and the choices by municipalities to construct these barriers that we're going to be talking about on Alton Road. And just to also highlight this, we can see on the map, but we do bring in the case in point of the Burwood Wall. A few miles over to the west, on the northwest boundary of Detroit, we do have the Burwood Wall, which separates the what we know now as Royal Oak. We bring this in as just a case in point, an example that this isn't just happening to Jefferson Chalmers and between Jefferson Chalmers and Royal Oak, but it's something happening across all of the US, but we also see a really good case in point with the Burwood Wall, which is listed on the National Register of Historic Places, because it is a reminder of these actions that started since before the 1940s, but we can see it physically here where there's physically reinforced red line borders to support federal financing for the construction of new housing developments. And what is defined as, if you see the key, if we scroll back up to the key, what is, the most best or still desirable, or, based on this similarity index, the access that any resident on either side of these borders could actually access in terms of banking, loans, and getting affordable housing or access to other amenities. Although by the early 1970s, we do have state and federal policy that corrected a lot of housing developers' policy actions to get funding to construct these walls and these barriers. We do see that despite the end of racial realty exclusionary practices and policy by the early 1970s, the built environment and continuing social and political tensions between Grosse Pointe, the broader city of Detroit, we're still acting right there on the edge of Jefferson Chalmers here. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and pass the torch to John, who has a lot of really good information that we pulled from the archives regarding specific examples of how this policy resulted in physical changes to the built environment and is exacerbating this political boundary, this social boundary, and this physical boundary between the communities.
Thank you. So we start in the mid 1970s, where Detroit and Jefferson Chalmers, more specifically Detroit, were having a border dispute because of two documents. Document in 1903 and the document in 1907, as explained before, for the annexation of Fairview. They both had different definitions of how the border of Grosse Pointe and Detroit ends. One says it ended 200 feet east of the center, and the other one says 200 feet east of the edge of the Alter Road. While this 33 feet difference doesn't seem like much, this is millions and millions of dollars of tax revenue that Grosse Pointe was missing out. So they sued Detroit to the Grand Court of Michigan, and the court sided with Grosse Pointe, setting all the borders to the 200 east of the center. And Grosse Pointe used this money to fund a quote unquote special area, as they called it, as we would later see as the closures. And this is a sign from Windmill Park that explicitly just says what they feel about Detroit. They specifically call the park right next to them, Angel Park, where pushers and basically where all the low life is. That's why they want to keep their park exclusive, and we'll see some exclusionary practices that they have done throughout the years. And this is an overview of the places we're gonna go over. This is the Court Road closure. Next is the Windmill Park closure. Next is the Weyburn and Jefferson closure. Then we have the St. Paul Brooks closure, the Churchill Avenue closure, the Weyburn and Mack closure, and then finally the Goff Street closure. This is an image from the Grosse Pointe side of the Court Road closure. This closure happened in 1993, quoting it had no significant purpose, according to Grosse Pointe News. If you scroll down, we have a red box around the area where we can, on our left, we have modern aerials of the location. If we scroll there, we then have the 1951 aerials. And if we scroll down, the second one, this one, the bridge on Alter Road, this used to be a three-way that went to later Jefferson Road, but because they wanted to point the park, which is right there called Windmill Park, they wanted it so exclusionary that they just decided cut off the road. No one can enter the park if they actually just physically cannot drive there. As you can see, there's the road goes off there, and now the road's just a curved road. This third one, the church here basically just extended over the road after getting funding by Grosse Pointe to expand the church. This one is one of the hardest ones to see on the aerial map because it's so cleverly hidden, it's just a fence. Like, as you can see on the road, like, even though we highlighted it in red, like, because it's just a thin, basically, border, no one can basically tell what's happening to it, and that really speaks to the volume of how, like, these are invisible to anyone who's just scrolling over Detroit and the Jefferson College community. But it has real impacts on the community that hits it as it just blocks off traffic. And to go further, this one, for anyone listening on the Zoom, might remember this. In 2014, the city of Grosse Pointe built a farmer's market that block off Churchillville and Weyburn Streets. In doing this, they basically just cut off a major road to Detroit. This was later torn down in 2019 due to major backlash by both the citizens of Jefferson Chalmers and Grosse Pointe. And to scroll down to our final one, we have Goff's, well, not our final one, but Weyburn. These are actually two different closures. The first one happened in 1988. This closure blocked off Weyburn streets. And the second one was even further. You can actually see in the previous image, the White House in the far right corner of there. They tore down an entire house and small park to build a public works building for the city of Grosse Pointe. That's just an aerial of the building. And we scroll down to the final one. This is Goff Road. This was the first one ever built in 1987 after the full signature and payment of Detroit to Grosse Pointe for their $1 million for their special project. And while this is just a quick overview, we have way more in our sources that you can check out for yourself. Now I will let Ethan close this out.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, John. So what I want to point out is it's very evident to see exactly what's happening today. There's clear evidence of all these borders, and a lot of these are hard to see from an aerial. So no change will happen if the community does not speak up or no voices are heard. And it's not just happening in this neighborhood, but all around Detroit in many areas. And we're just covering one point of these. And a lot has changed in the diversity of the community of both Grosse Pointe and Jefferson Chalmers since a lot of these borders were built. So one of the Grosse Pointers want the wall to be torn down as a community project between Jefferson Chalmers and Grosse Pointe. They think that this would be a good bonding experience between the two neighborhoods and a example setter for the rest of Detroit to tear down these borders and just have flow between the two neighborhoods. I'd like to thank the Jefferson Chalmers community for opening up their neighborhood and showing us around and a lot of important history that we learned there. And I look forward to any questions at the end of the presentation.